This is Dave Hogue from Los Banos Today, and I would like to welcome you to a special edition of Los Banos Today. And this evening, we've got Virginia Gonzalez. Welcome to the show, Virginia.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. I think we're going to start off with, a little bit about you, and then we'll start off with what is considered bullying. But first, share with us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Virginia Gonzalez, and I have a master's degree in psychology, and I'm also licensed as a marriage and family therapist. So, for several years now, I've been working in this field, especially with children and what goes on in the schools, because we know bullying is definitely a big thing right now. And it's probably something that's been going on for a really long time. It just hasn't really been given a label, a name, or hasn't really been identified as what's going on. And so, in general, when one talks about bullying, what generally it encompasses is some type of aggression that one person takes towards somebody else, and it could be aggression of physical sense, it could be verbal, emotional, psychological, and often it could be a blend of all those types. It generally is some type of occurrence that's repetitive. It's happened more than one time. It also, and generally, also has to do with some type of control of power, where somebody wants to have some type of power over somebody else. So in general, I would say that's what we're going to be talking about, and that could go into so many different categories.
It can. It's so deep. The topic is so deep. And we were talking about that before the show, and that's one of the reasons we want to have several sessions, because it's quite important and it's quite deep. It can touch our lives in so many different ways, but mostly our kids see it in school.
Yes.
And we were talking about that too. Early in school, kids will begin to see it as they develop, and I guess we're going to touch more in that. So why would a child want to bully another child?
Yeah, so often that's a question that many people have and don't understand. Like, why would this kid do this to somebody else? Or sometimes it even happens with adults. It could even happen in the workplace. But it's basically often what happens when somebody takes on these bullying characteristics of having some type of power or aggression towards somebody else. It often is something that the person is looking for some type of power. So they want to have power over another person. And when we go deeper, like why would a kid want to have power over another kid? Oftentimes what we find is that kid was feeling powerless at some point. And so why would that kid feel powerless? That could encompass, again, so many different reasons.
From something that might have happened at home.
Yes.
And now it's being brought to school.
Correct.
Sometimes parents do that at work.
Yes.
You go to work, you have a bad day, you bring it home. Something happens at home, you bring it to work.
Yes, and that's often the case, even though I think that's a difficult topic to talk about, and to be able to even accept it, to say like what dynamics or my interactions with my spouse or with my family at home is going to really be the impact on how my child is acting at school, especially when these are undesirable type of behaviors happening. And so it's really hard to go there, and a lot of people often don't want to talk about that, of what's going on at home or what's the kid exposed to. But unfortunately, what we've seen that's very common is that sometimes us as adults, we can be quite aggressive towards each other. Sometimes it's verbally, sometimes it's physically, sometimes it could just take in so many different forms, but often we don't realize it. And sometimes we're yelling at our children, and sometimes it was an impulsive thing, or we might feel like we had the right to be upset, but then we get upset why our child is yelling at somebody else, or calling somebody else names that maybe we might be calling our spouse names out of anger, or our siblings, our family, our neighbors even.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to talk about this, because often bullying can encompass something so much larger, which makes us all really have to look at our own behavior and our own attitudes and just the dynamics that we have, or how we saw our parents grow up, or the household, whatever form that was. How was that, and how healthy were those interactions? I think it's really important to talk about that cycle, because I think before I ever was exposed to knowing there was a cycle, I didn't understand it. And once I heard about it and knew there was a cycle of abuse, a cycle of power, I just was able to understand relationships a lot better. And so in general, when we talk about like cycles of abuse or cycles of aggression, whatever you want to call it in that sense, there's different names to it. But basically often, just part of human behavior, there's times where we could get caught into this cycle to where we're with somebody else, another person. It could be a spouse, or it could be another person you're in a relationship with in any form, and where there's some type of repetitive abuse that keeps occurring. And this abuse sometimes doesn't seem like abuse, so a lot of people don't realize it, but this could include putting somebody down, or it could include like manipulating somebody else's behaviors, or it could even be a push, a shove, holding somebody really, really tight. It could be a type of physical aggression that sometimes we don't think about. Or it could be the cyber type of abuse, where it's like, let me see your Facebook, your Instagram password. I need to have all of it. And just really, so all of that, it could be considered a type of abuse, actually, which a lot of people don't understand.
Almost obsessive.
Yes. And so sometimes that's what we're going to call, I guess when we speak about abuse, it's going to encompass all these things that sometimes we don't want to realize that are abuse. So sometimes when we're in this cycle, it's oftentimes that it's not always abuse. So this is like with bullying, or just in family relationships. It's not always bullying. It's not always aggression, which is why sometimes these relationships are still going on, and they're still people are still together. But often there'll be times where things calm down. So after an incident of aggression, there'll be people call it different names, different stages. Some call it like the honeymoon stage, where everything is at peace, where everything is calm, and then sometimes that builds up to tension, to where all of a sudden there's little things happening. So in bullying, it could be maybe there's a little bit of teasing, or a little bit of some type of verbal aggression, maybe some intimidation going on, where the person is noticing like, okay, I'm walking on eggshells, I need to be careful, maybe I need to be extra nice to the other person for this time. And then it's when all of a sudden from the tension, it builds up to that type of abuse, or that incident where something happens, and that could take form in a obvious physical sense, or it could not. It could be more complicated than that. But we'll know when we are feeling violated in some sense. And then after that's usually when there's that next stage of, again, where it's going back, it's calming down. So it's like a stage of like forgiveness. Sometimes it's apologies. Sometimes it could be denial, or like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Or it could just be like, this won't happen again, I'm sorry. Or it could blame. It could be, well, you did this. That's why I'm doing this to you. If you wouldn't have done this, I wouldn't have done this to you.
And we hear that so often.
Right, and sometimes we believe it. And we think, oh, okay, it is my fault. Maybe if I would have just given the bully my lunch money, I wouldn't have gotten beat up. Or maybe if I would have listened the first time, I wouldn't have had to get slapped. And so sometimes when we're in this cycle, we don't even realize it. And that's the thing. And then from there, it's again, there's like the nice calm state where there's nothing happening, and it just cycles up. And one thing we've noticed a lot is that in these cycles, often the calm state shortens. So sometimes at first there's a longer period of time where there's that honeymoon stage where everything is fine, and after a while it just gets less and less and less, and that's where the aggression increases, where it could start off with teasing, intimidation, and then it becomes verbal aggression, then it becomes psychological, then it becomes physical, it can become sexual, it could take so many forms, but often we notice that the severity increases and increases with time.
Wow. Hurtful, because like you said, it can go in so many different ways. And that is what we see a lot in different, even in relationships that I see, where somebody will be staying with somebody else who's beating them and being very aggressive, like you said, or demeaning. Yes. And you see these relationships a lot, and you often wonder, I wonder to myself, why is this person staying with this person when they're so aggressive or whatever? And that answers it right there. It's the cycle. And just, and until the other person's ready, maybe, I don't know, I guess.
And there's actually so many reasons for that. Like if one looks, there's not one answer to why one would stay in a relationship. If we go that route of like domestic violence, there's so many reasons. So
that means so much to a lot of us. I know for me it means a lot to hear that.
Yes, and it's a thing that I think we don't realize. Sometimes we think with children, like maybe if we don't talk about it, they'll forget. Or maybe like the kids, sometimes as kids, when we see things that we don't want to repeat, we'll say, I'll just never be like my mom again or my dad. I don't want to be like that person. But if you don't really ever process it and talk about it and find out why things happened, oftentimes we end up repeating the same cycle. And that could be being the bully, as one could say, or the abuser, or the victim. And often it's just a cycle that we just take on, and it's like not a conscious decision of this is what I'm going to do. It's just happening in your life based on the things, the situations or whatever that you've been in. It will manifest itself in those ways. Yes. And so you'll find yourself in that, or you're either the one doing it or the one it's being done to. Yes. And so I think here we're looking at how to identify that and understanding. To be able to put a stop to it, because that's the only way to stop the cycle. People sometimes hope, like, maybe if I'm nicer, it'll just stop. But oftentimes, more times than not, it doesn't, unless there's an interruption and the person that's the bully that's doing the type of harm gets some type of help and recognizes that they need help.
Hi, I'm Dave, the owner of the Central Valley Geeks. Did you know we offer iPhone screen repair? We can repair most iPhone screens within 15 minutes. Stop on by or give us a call, 209-826-3410. We are located at 924 6th Street, downtown Los Banos. Thank you. Have a great day.
So, which is why it's important to talk about it, to be able to realize and
we were talking before the show, kids sports today, it's getting to a point where a lot of families are very aggressive about their kids. And there's a lot of issues with, kids wearing helmets, kids not getting hit and all this kind of thing. So it's very important for the physical side of the kids to be safe. But when you begin to see the parents acting aggressively on the field because their child fell down or got hit or bumped, and it wasn't on purpose, but it happened. In sports, those kinds of things are going to happen, but we do see this begin to manifest in adults, where they begin to show aggression on the field in front of the kids, and then the kids see that, and they think, oh, this is how I'm supposed to be when you do that. And then we begin to see the kids enacting the same behavior onto other kids. Right. Yes, so much of it's the learned behavior piece, where if we do something, the child is learning to do the same behavior. If we're able to control ourselves, if we
have some type of coping skills, ways to relax, de-escalate ourselves, the child will just automatically learn, and they will see what works for us, and automatically they will start doing that themselves, versus when we're having a hard time de-escalating ourselves, and we're having a hard time not yelling at our spouse or our coworkers or our neighbor, then it's really hard to expect a child to have some type of self-control that we don't even have.
Is there kids that are more prone to being bullied?
Yes, and oftentimes, like we just talked about the cycle. So where if you are being bullied or you're witnessing it, you could become the bully, but there's also risks that you could be bullied. And oftentimes it's as a result of being in a situation where there's unpredictability, maybe at home or maybe in a different situation, the child could be a lot more maybe quiet. Maybe they don't have as many friends. And maybe they could just seem a little bit more awkward socially because they're fearful. So when we look at things like that, sometimes it's like with children that don't have the social skills, sometimes those are the ones that tend to get bullied. Sometimes too, kids that are going through different, well, it could be up to many situations why they may have like, let's say like different behaviors. And so let's say just something that's not in the norm. So we know children are trying to fit in. They're trying to figure out, especially like teens, where they're trying to figure out middle
what
school.
What group do I belong to?
Like, who am I? So often when they're trying to figure that out, there are sometimes kids that for whatever reason or incidents or chaos going on in their life, they're a little bit more behind in that stage. So they wouldn't be like maybe what we would call a cool kid, or maybe they don't have a lot of friends. And oftentimes those are the kids that might get picked on because they'll be perceived as weak, or they'll be perceived as alone, so no one's going to defend them. I could take out my anger on them, or I could pick on them. Or sometimes it's even like, I think we've all probably seen sometimes children, if they see somebody that looks different or that has some type of disability, like they think it's funny, or they pick on that person and make fun of them, and sometimes that puts somebody at risk to get bullied. There's kids that maybe they're being made fun of for a particular characteristic or a specific, maybe a habit, and if they see it on somebody else, they automatically make fun of them, or it's because it's something they wish they had. So sometimes maybe a kid that struggles with math is in a math class and sees a kid that's really good at math. To hide part of their insecurity comes out like, I'm going to make fun of you.
I went through that when I was trying to play basketball. I wasn't the tallest guy. And so, I got harassed a lot until I actually became more athletic in those younger years. But I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the tallest. Just it wasn't the right, And so my other friends were, and that made me feel inferior. So I took on these things of, less than, not good enough, blah, blah, blah. But then through practice, I got better. And better. But it took somebody to come to me and give me some positive feedback and say, you know what, this is how we all learn. And it's okay, but it's going to take some hard work. And it took a lot of hard work, but I was able to get to a point. So, and I see that so much in what you're saying here. Things that make us stand out, that make us feel a little bit different or awkward.
And especially if you come from maybe from at home or for another place in the community where you're feeling already picked on, or maybe something else already messed with your self-esteem, it's easy to let something else hurt you. And it's easy to believe lies from somebody else, or when somebody else teases you and maybe you're used to being teased all the time. You might just take it in, not fight back or say anything, and maybe that's what the bully wants, and they just continue doing that.
Virginia, what can prevent a child from being bullied?
So, as we just talked about, like self-esteem being a piece in this, one of the things that we've noticed could really prevent a kid from being bullied is sometimes joining a group or a club where they could make friends, or know other people, and where they could build sometimes their social skills if they don't have, if maybe they're not really strong in that area.
Okay.
So often we've seen that kids that have other friends also could get defended by the friends.
Right.
The friends could speak up for them if they're not speaking up, versus if a kid is by themselves, they might not have somebody else telling them that what's happening is not okay.
Right.
So oftentimes we would see that the kids that were being bullied for a long time were just used to it, and they didn't think it was anything wrong, or they felt like they deserved it, and they felt like, well, it's true, it's because I'm whatever they're calling them, or because I should be giving them what they're asking for. So oftentimes having a group of friends, having peers around them that could influence, that could speak to them and help them understand like what's going on. So we've seen that's really been helpful, and usually just developing more interests.
Okay.
We've seen that's something that works as well. Like maybe it could be a sport, maybe it could be an art class, finding out what's your area of strength. And usually when you have a good sense of self-esteem and you have good friends, oftentimes that could prevent, it doesn't mean it will completely prevent it, but that could be things that we've seen that prevents that from like reoccurring.
But I think, you know, that goes into my next question, which is how can a parent ask their child if they feel like they're being bullied?
Yeah, so sometimes that could be a hard question because often as parents, we might not want to ask, or sometimes we're scared to know the answer, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
And that could be for bullying, depression, or suicide.
Yeah.
It's hard to ask a child, are you suicidal? Have you ever been? I've talked to so many parents that have never asked their child that and don't want to. And I understand, like, it's hard. When I even asked myself that question, I was like, can I ask my nephew that? And I was like, oh, I don't want to. I was scared to hear, like, I was pretty confident he would say no, but I wasn't at the same time. So it's the same thing, I think, with bullying. Sometimes we don't want to talk about it with our children. Because we don't want to know the answer, or we don't know if we'll know how to help. And so oftentimes what we might recommend parents to ask is, well, to have really open communication with the child. That's a key to